Hi everyone, it's Miss Carla from the Elanco Library. Hope you guys are doing well. We're going to continue on with Anna Green Gables. We are still on chapter 2 and we will go ahead and continue. What we found out in this chapter is that Matthew Cuthbert got a girl orphan instead of a boy orphan, and he's still going to take her home to Marilla to his sister, and they're gonna have a discussion then about what to do with her. But right now, Anne is very excited to meet her new family in her new home. She's super excited. Right now they're in the buggy and they're gonna leave the train station and head towards Green Gables. So we will go ahead and continue where we left off. All right. So the child put out her hand and broke off a branch of wild plum that brushed against the side of the buggy. Isn't that beautiful? What did that tree leaning out from the bank, all white and lacy, make you think of? She asked. Well, I don't know, said Matthew. Why, a bride, of course. A bride all in white with a lovely misty veil. I've never seen one, but I can imagine what she would look like. I don't ever expect to be a bride myself. I'm so homely, nobody will ever want to marry me, unless it might be a foreign missionary. I suppose a foreign missionary might be very particular. This morning when I left the asylum, I felt so ashamed because I had to wear this horrid old wincey dress. All the orphans had to wear them, you know. A merchant in Hopetown last winter donated 300 yards of wincey to the asylum. Some people said it was because he couldn't sell it, but I'd rather believe that was out of the kindness of his heart, wouldn't you? When we got in the train, I felt as if everybody must be looking at me and pitying me. But I just went to work and imagined that I had on the most beautiful pale blue silk dress, because when you are imagining, you might as well imagine something worthwhile. And a big hat with all flowers and nodding plumes and a gold watch and kid gloves and boots. I trained up right away and I enjoyed my trip to the island with all my might. I wasn't a bit sick coming over in the boat. Neither was Miss Spencer, although she generally is. She said she hadn't had time to gotten sick, watching to see that I didn't fall overboard. She said she never saw the beat of me for prowling about, but if it did keep her from getting seasick, it's a mercy I did prowl, isn't it? And I wanted to see everything that was to be seen on the boat because I didn't know whether I'd ever have another opportunity. Oh, there are a lot more cherry trees all in bloom. This island is the bloomiest place. I just love it already, and I'm so glad I'm going to live here. I've always heard that Prince Edward Island was the prettiest place in the world, and I used to imagine I was living here, but I never really expected I would. It's delightful when your imaginations come true, isn't it? But those red roads are so funny. When we got into the train at Charlottetown and the red roads began to flash past, I asked Miss Spencer what made them red. She said she didn't know, and for pity's sake, stop asking her any more questions. She said I must have asked her 1,000 questions already. I suppose I had to, but how are you going to find out about things if you don't ask questions? And what does make the roads red? Well, I don't know, said Matthew. Well, that's one of the things to find out sometime. Isn't it splendid to think of all the things there are to find out about? It just makes me feel very glad to be alive. It's such an interesting world. It wouldn't be half so interesting if we knew all about everything, would it? There'd be no scope for imagination there, would there? But am I talking too much? People are always telling me I do. Would you rather I didn't talk? If you say so, I'll stop. I can stop when I make my mind up to it, although it is difficult. Matthew, much to his own surprise, was enjoying himself. Like most quiet folks, he liked talking to people when they were willing to do the talking themselves and did not expect him to keep his end of it. He thought he kind of liked her chatter. So, as he said as shyly as usual, "Oh, you can talk as much as you like, I don't mind." "Oh, I'm so glad. I know you and I are going to get along just fine. It's such a relief to talk when one wants to and not to be told that children should be seen, not heard." "I've had that said to me 1,000,000 times, and people laugh at me because I use big words. But if you have big ideas, you have to use big words to express them, haven't you?" "Well, now, that seems reasonable," said Matthew. Miss Spencer said that my tongue must be hung in the middle, but it isn't. It is firmly fastened to one end. Miss Spencer said your place was named Green Gables. I asked her all about it. "Is there a brook anywhere near Green Gables? I forgot to ask Miss Spencer that." "Well, now, yes, there's one right below the house." "Fancy! It's always been one of my dreams to live near a brook. I never expected I would, though. Dreams don't often come true, do they? Wouldn't it be nice if they did? But just now I feel pretty nearly perfectly happy. I can't feel exactly perfectly happy because, well, what color would you call this? She twitched one of her long glossy braids over her thin shoulder and held it up before Matthew's eyes. Matthew was not used to deciding on the tints of ladies' tresses, but in this case, there couldn't be much doubt. It's red, ain't it? He said. The girl let the braid drop back with a sigh that seemed to come from her very toes and to exhale forth all the sorrows of the ages. Yes, it's red, she said resignedly. Now you see why I can't be perfectly happy. Nobody could who has red hair. I don't mind the other things so much, the freckles, the green eyes, my skinniness. But yeah, I read of a girl once in a novel who had a lifelong sorrow, but it wasn't red hair. Her hair was pure gold rippling back from her brow. What's an alabaster brow anyways? I could never find out. Can you tell me? Well, now I'm afraid I can't, said Matthew, who was getting a little dizzy. He felt as he had once felt in his rash youth when another boy had enticed him on the merry-go-round at a picnic. Well, whatever it is, it must have been something nice because she was divinely beautiful. Have you ever imagined what it must feel like to be divinely beautiful? Well, no, now I haven't, confessed Matthew. I have often. What would you rather be if you had a choice? Divinely beautiful or dazzlingly clever or angelically good? Well, now, I don't know exactly. Neither do I. I can never decide, but it doesn't make much real difference, for it isn't likely I'll ever be either. It's certain I'll never be really good. Miss Spencer says, "Oh, Mr. Cuthbert! Oh, Mr. Cuthbert! Oh, Mr. Cuthbert!" That's not what Miss Spencer had said. Neither had the child tumbled out of the buggy, nor had Matthew done anything astonishing. It had simply rounded a curve in the road and found themselves in the avenue. The avenue, so called by the New Bridge people, was a stretch of road 400 or 500 yards long, completely arched over with huge, wide, spreading apple trees, planted years ago by an eccentric old farmer. Overhead was one long canopy of snowy, fragrant bloom. Below the boughs, the air was full of purple twilight, and far ahead, a glimpse of painted sunset sky shone like a great rose window at the end of a cathedral aisle. The beauty seemed to strike the child dumb. She leaned back in the buggy, and her thin hand clasped before her, her face lifted rapturously to the white splendor above. Even when they had passed out and were driving down the long slope to New Bridge, she never moved or spoke. Still, with a rapt face, she gazed afar in the sunset's west, with eyes that saw visions trooping splendidly across that glowing background. When 3 more miles had dropped away behind them, the child had not spoken. She could keep silence, it was evident, as energetically as she could talk. "I guess you're feeling pretty tired and hungry," Matthew ventured to say at last, accounting for her long visitation of dumbness with the only reason he could think of. "But we haven't very far to go now, only another mile." She came out of her reverie with a deep sigh and looked at him with the dreamy gaze of a soul that had been wandering afar, star-led. "Oh, Mr. Cuthbert," she whispered, "that place we came through, that white place, what was it?" "Well, now you must mean the avenue," said Matthew after a few moments of profound reflection. "It is a kind of pretty place." "Pretty? Oh, pretty doesn't seem the right word to use, nor beautiful either. That don't go far enough. Oh, it was wonderful, wonderful. It's the first thing I've ever saw that couldn't be improved upon by the imagination. It just satisfies me here." And she put one hand over her chest. "It gave me a queer, funny ache, and yet a pleasant ache." "Did you ever have an ache like that, Mr. Cuthbert?" "Well, now, I just can't recollect I've ever had. I've had it lots of times whenever I see anything royally beautiful. But they shouldn't call that lovely place the Avenue. There is no meaning in a name like that. They should call it, let me see. The White Way of Delight. Isn't that a nice imaginative name? When I don't like the name of a place or a person, I always imagine a new one and always think of themselves. Other people may call that place the Avenue, but I shall always call it the White Way of Delight. Have we really only another mile to go before we get home? Oh, I'm glad and I'm sorry. I'm sorry because this drive has been so pleasant, and I'm always sorry when pleasant things end. Something still pleasanter may come after, but you can never be sure. But I am glad to think of that getting home. You see, I've never had a real home since I can remember. It gives me that pleasant ache again just to think of coming to a really, truly home. Oh, isn't that pretty? They had driven over the crest of a hill. Below them was a pond, looking almost like a river, so long and winding was it. A bridge spanned it midway from there to its lower end, where an umber-hued belt of sand hills shut in from the dark blue gulf beyond. The water was the glory of many shifting hues, the most spiritual shadings of crocus and rose and ethereal green, with other elusive tintings for which no name has ever been found. Above the bridge, the pond ran up into fringing groves of fir and maple and lay all darkly translucent in their wavering shadows. There was a little gray house peering around a white apple orchard on a slope beyond, and although it was not quite dark, a light was shining from one of its windows. That's Barry's Pond, said Matthew. Oh, I don't like that name either. I shall call it, let me see, the Lake of Shining Waters. I know because of the thrill. When I hit on a name that suits exactly it, it gives me a thrill. Do things ever give you thrill? Matthew thought about it for a little bit. Well, now, yes. It always gives me a kind of thrill to see them ugly white grubs that spade up in the cucumber beds. I hate the look of them. Oh, I don't think that can be exactly the same kind of a thrill. Do you think it can? There doesn't seem to be much connection between grubs and lakes of shining waters, does there? But why do other people call it Barry's Pond? I reckon because Mr. Barry lives up there in that house. Orchard Slope's the name of his place. If it wasn't for the big bush beyond it, you could see Green Gables from here. But we have to go over the bridge and round by the road, so it's near half a mile further. Has Mr. Barry any little girls? Well, not so very little, about my size. He's got one about 11. Her name's Deanna. Oh, what a perfectly lovely name, Anne said. Well, I don't know. There's something dreadful heathenish about it, it seems to me. I'd rather Jane or Mary or some sensible name like that. But when Deanna was born, there was a schoolmaster boarding there, and they gave him the naming of her, and he called her Deanna. I wish there had been a schoolmaster like that around when I was born then. Oh, here we are at the bridge. I'm going to have to shut my eyes tight. I'm always afraid of going over bridges. I can't help imagining that perhaps just as we get to the middle, they'll crumple up like a jackknife and nip us. So I shut my eyes. I always have to open them for all when I think we're getting near the middle. Because you see, if the bridge did crumple up, I'd want to see it crumple. There, we're over. Now I'll look back. Good night, dear Lake of Shining Waters. I always say goodnight to the things I love, just as I would to people. I think they like it. That water looks like as if it was smiling at me. When they had driven up the further hill and round the corner, Matthew said, "We're pretty near home now. That's Green Gables over." "Oh, don't tell me," she interrupted breathlessly, catching his partially raised arm and shutting her eyes that she might not see his gesture. "Let me guess. I'm sure I'll guess right." She opened her eyes and looked about her. They were on the crest of a hill. The sun had set some time since, but the landscape was still clear in the mellow afterlight. To the west, a dark church spire rose up against a marigold sky. Below was a little valley, and beyond a long, gently rising slope with snug farmsteads scattered along it. From one to another, the child's eyes darted, eager and wistful. At last, they lingered on one way to the left, far back from the road, dimly white with blossoming trees in the twilight of the surrounding woods. Over it, in the stainless southwest sky, a great crystal white star was shining like a lamp of guidance and promise. "That's it, isn't it?" she said, pointing. Matthew slapped the reins on the mare's back delightedly. "Well, now you guessed it, but I reckon Miss Spencer described it to you so you could tell." "No, she really didn't. I hadn't any idea what it looked like, but just as soon as I saw it, I felt it was home. Do you know, my arm must be black and blue from the elbow up. I pinched myself so many times today. Every little while, a horrible sickening feeling would come over me, and I'd be so afraid it was all a dream. Then I'd pinch myself to see if it was real. Until suddenly I remembered that even supposing it was only a dream, I'd better go on dreaming as long as I could. So I stopped pinching. But it is real, and we're nearly home. With a sigh of rapture, she relapsed into silence. Matthew stirred uneasily. He felt glad that it would be Marilla, not he, who would have to tell this little waif of the world that the home she longed for was not to be hers after all. By the time they arrived at the house, Matthew was shrinking from the approaching revelation with an energy he did not understand. It was not of Marilla or himself he was thinking of the trouble this mistake was probably going to make for them, but of the child's disappointment. When he thought of that rapt light being quenched in her eyes, he had an uncomfortable feeling that he was going to assist at murdering something. Much the same feeling that came over him when he had to kill a lamb or a calf or any other innocent little creature. The yard was quite dark as they turned into it, and the poplar leaves were rustling silkily all around it. "Listen to the trees talking in their sleep," she whispered as he lifted her to the ground. "What nice dreams they must have." Then, holding tightly to the carpet bag which contained all of her worldly goods, she followed him into the house. Alright, so next video we will do chapter 3. Alright, it was really nice reading with you guys, and I'll see you next time. Bye!